feel better than I've ever felt in a moment in my entire life.
So we're all fine.
Yep.
A cold opening from Brooklyn Nine-Nine there. What could that have to do with English Paper 1? Conor Murphy from Skibbereen Community College in County Cork joins us from our Cork studio and will explain all. Conor, before we get into cold opens, English Higher Level Paper 1, explain to me the format of the paper.
You got two big sections. The text section, which is comprehension and a formal piece of writing, and you have an essay to write as well. The classic essay, the essay is worth 100 marks, 25% of your overall exam, and the other two questions are worth 50 marks each, which it's easy. It's good to keep in mind that they're also 50 marks is also what you get for the poetry, so you should spend as much time on paper 1 with those 250 as you do on the poetry, which not a lot of people think about. The A section has got you simple comprehension. You read a piece and then you answer 3 questions. Very rigid kind of format. The first question is basically a content question. The second question is your opinion. And the third question asks you about the style and techniques used by the writer, and you identify them and explain how powerful they work, how powerful they were, how they worked, how they didn't work, etc. And then B, you've got a very formal essay to write, very formal piece. It could be a podcast, could be an opinion piece, could be a blog. And you have to follow a very strict format. They give you 3 points you have to touch on, and you have to touch on those 3 points, and then you get to choose your essay. And the essay, you get a selection of 7. There's always a couple of short stories, a discursive piece, an opinion piece. There's always a speech, and sometimes there's a descriptive piece, and sometimes there isn't.
Okay, so you're sitting in the exam hall, you're handed your exam paper. Where do you start?
Well, you start by trying not to panic. First of all, it's your first exam, and the paper 1 is a lovely exam. The paper 1 is your friend. So you're going in, and you're going to meet your friend, and your friend wants to know all about you, and the friend wants to know, but the friend does like you to structure stuff. So the first thing you do is you go to the essay at the back, and you'll have gone in with a preconception of what kind of essay you want to do. So you quickly read the titles, and after a moment of severe panic, you pause and you tick at least 2 that you think might suit you. And then you go and you look at the B's, they're the formal pieces, and you look again to see which one of those would suit you best, because they can be a bit tricky sometimes. So you look into which one do I like, and you mark that one, and then you go to the A and you pick your A. It's important to remember, and students always forget this, you can't do an A and a B from the same text. So you pick your B, because they can be tricky, and then you got 2 texts left from your selection of 3, so two left, and then you pick the A. And you pick the A by reading the first paragraph and reading the questions and seeing which ones suit you best. You should be able to do, all Leaving Cert higher level students should be able to do any of the A's, because they're very rigid, very structured, and you'll be able to do them. There should be no problem. B's can be a little bit tricky, and the essay, once you get to the essay, I guarantee you'll be fine. Because what you'll do then is, you see, you'll do the A, you'll do the B, and then you'll do the essay. And exactly like my old English teacher told me back in the 1800s, your subconscious will be working away on your essay, and by the time you get there, you'll have some kind of ideas, and then you plan away.
How long do you get for the exam, and how long should you spend on each question?
I've been teaching for 25 plus years, and I have to do the maths of it every single year. I'm an English teacher, not a maths teacher. The exam is 170 minutes long. I try to learn this off, and there's about 10 minutes to look around the paper, and you try to do that as quickly as you possibly can. That's why you don't have to read every single text. You just read the first paragraph in the questions. Otherwise, you're eating into your time. And give yourself about 40 minutes for the A, about 40 minutes for the B, and about 80 minutes then, an hour and 20 then, for the essay. Now, if you're going over a little bit, these are movable feasts. But what you can't do, and what you never want to do, is leave less than an hour and 10 for the essay. That is the minimum you have, because you need to plan it carefully, and then you need to write it. And you need at least an hour writing it. So I would suggest what you do is, when you sit down, you write down the time in A, so it's at 9:30, 9:35, or 9:40, depending on how long you're taking to write it, until the time is up. So what's 9:40 to 20 past 10? I think that's 40 minutes, isn't it?
Yep.
So 9:40 to 10:20, and then you know that, I better finish at 10:20, and you leave a bit of space in case you want to come back to it, and then you do the B, exactly the same thing, 10:20 plus 40 minutes, whatever that is, and you write that down, and you do the B, you stop, and then you do the essay, and if you have time at the end, you can come back and if you want to add bits and pieces of them. Because remember, the essay is 25% of your exam. So you want to make sure you do that well and you do that right.
Talk to me about essay writing. You have thoughts about aesthetic writing and persuasive writing.
So there are so many different varieties. This goes for B as well. There's a lot of varieties of essays, and people get very rigid and very concerned about, oh, this is a personal essay, I must have these rules must apply. This is a speech, these rules must apply. So instead of thinking about the genre and what rules apply to that genre, think about it in terms of a continuum of writing techniques. So you're going in with all these writing techniques, and you're going from aesthetic writing on one side of the line to persuasive or very kind of formal and rigid rules on the other with loads of techniques. So aesthetic writing is kind of descriptive. My students call it aesthetic writing, but I find that a little bit rude. I'm a little bit older than them, so I'm going to insist in calling it aesthetic.
Okay.
They're embarrassed by me, but I don't care. I'm sticking with aesthetic. So that's descriptive writing. It's kind of like poetry, and you're using similes and all alliteration, all the good stuff. And then as you go along the line, you go into persuasive, which is much more formal and much more use of techniques and a very clear structure. So when you're looking at what you're writing, you're deciding, where are my techniques? I might take a little bit over here and I might take a little bit over there. For instance, my students today were looking at a piece of personal writing, and there were a few rhetorical questions thrown in there. And there was a few descriptive elements thrown in there. So the personal writing isn't all down to one end. It's not all these rigid rules. You can pick and choose which techniques you want. So when you sit down, you can put your little aesthetic to persuasive line on your sheet of paper, just to remind you exactly how you're going along. And when you plan your essay, you can just jot down a few techniques, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to start waffling, no matter what the essay is. You don't want to waffle and ramble on and on. What you want to make sure is that you are engaging the reader, and that's what techniques do. They engage the reader.
Okay. How long should your essay be? Because there's nothing that strikes greater fear into my heart when I'm sitting there in exam hall and somebody asks for more paper and I've only 3 pages written. How long should your essay be?
I must admit, I was one of those people who did that. I did that calculatedly during one of my Leaving Cert exams. I waited for 20 minutes, put up my hand and asked for paper just to annoy my friend who was sitting behind me. And he asked me afterwards, did you do that on purpose? I said, yeah, just to freak you out. I said, it did. So you write about 6 to 7 pages. So I go through them. So A1 is a page and a little bit. A2 is a page and a little bit. A3 is about 2 pages. The B is about 3 to 4 pages. Don't write more than 4 pages for the B. These are new booklets as well, you see. So they're not the old A4 sheets. They're new booklets, so they're slightly smaller. So the pages are a little bit different to what they used to be. So in the B, you don't want to write less than 3, but you definitely don't want to write more than 4, because what you're doing is you're wasting time. You don't need to. So you're wasting time when you could be writing your essay. And the essay then is between 6 and 7 plus. I mean, some people write more and they need to write more for whatever they're writing in their handwriting. So you don't want to write less than 6 pages.
Okay. Finally, Conor, and quickly, any tips to avoid dropping marks, like looking for, make sure you're spelling everything correctly, not messing up grammar? What are the tips and tricks to avoid dropping unnecessary marks?
There's paragraphs are the big one. I'm always thinking of paragraphs. Make sure you use your paragraphs well. A lot of people talk about spelling, but by the time you're in the exam, if you start thinking too early about your spelling, you're going to kind of pause and you're going to lose the flow of everything. So make sure that you have your paragraphs nice and clear, especially for A1, 2, and 3. Because they're very clear, they're very structured answers. So you need to have very clear structure on your page to show the examiner, this is my first point, this is my second point, etc., etc. And after that, then, the use of the kind of creative use of paragraphs works really well in the essay writing. The other thing is, and this is my top tip for how to do well, is the paper is structured to help the student. So you have A1, 2, and 3. And remember, 3 is all about techniques. So the examiner, the paper is telling you, don't forget about the techniques. So when you're doing B, the B gives you a structure. 3, you must hit these 3 topics. And don't forget to use the techniques that you looked at in A3 in your B. So then you go to your essay, you're looking at structure like in B, techniques like in A3. I must make sure I use all those. And they're the top tips for not losing marks, because they're structure and they're techniques. And then there's your voice and your own ideas and your own wonderful opinions, and let them come through the essay.
Before I let you go, Conor, I mentioned there the importance of a cold. We talked about cold opening in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Talk to me about the importance of your opening line in your essay.
All right, I was literally speaking to my students earlier on today. We were reading a chapter of Jeanette McCurdy's book, I'm Glad My Mom Died. Jeanette McCurdy was as Sam in Sam and Cat and in iCarly, and she wrote a wonderful memoir,
Great
which are
book,
full of fantastic chapters, which are basically little personal essays. So we read one of those, and we noticed how she's straight to the point, straight into the story. It was about her first kiss that she had to do on film, and she's describing the first kiss at the beginning. You don't want to bore the reader, which is me, which is the examiner, with a boring essay, opening paragraph explaining what you're going to do in your personal essay, for instance, or what you're going to do in your speech, or what you're going to do in anything. What you want to do is you want to think about it and what's appropriate and get in there quickly. Just like Brooklyn Nine-Nine with the cold open. Get in there, grab their attention. So Jeanette McCurdy was brilliant at this. That could have been an essay about an important event in her life, for instance. And if as I said this to the students, if the students got that, a load of them would write, yeah, this we've many important events in our lives. This event and that event and next event. I don't want to read that. That's so boring. Get rid of it. Go straight instead to whatever that event was. And in this particular instance, it was her first kiss on screen, and she described it in great detail, and it was very funny and very moving as she went on then. And then what you do then is about 3 paragraphs down, then you do if there are certain events that are very important in our life. So you're moving what you would have had as your introduction, the boring introduction, you're rewriting it, make it a little bit more interesting, and you're putting it in like the 3rd paragraph, because you do have to reflect.
Great advice there. Thank you so much, Conor. That is Conor Murphy from Skibbereen Community College.